What do you do when you've spent 20 years in the Marine Corps and you still want to serve, but not in uniform? That's the question my guest worked through about 2 years before he retired. And the answer he landed on was energy policy. Welcome to Project Vanguard, where veterans and mission-driven leaders share what it takes to build America's energy future. I'm your host, Kevin Doffing. Jim Purekal is a retired Marine Corps major. 20 years in aviation, a Congressional Fellowship on Capitol Hill, and a final tour at the Pentagon. He retired through a SkillBridge Fellowship and now runs Virginia legislative work for Advanced Energy United. We talk about why he chose this industry instead of the standard pathway of going to a defense contractor, how he prepared for the transition while still on active duty, and what he tells veterans now about the soft skills they already have and the learning curve they should expect. If you're thinking about getting out, this is the conversation for you. Let's get into it. Well, Jim, you were just kind of catching us up on everything that's been going on in Virginia. Would you like to tell everybody what you do with AEU?
Yeah, so AEU, at Advanced Energy United, we call ourselves United. We went through a rebranding a few years ago and switched ourselves over to Advanced Energy United. Advanced Energy United is a trade association. For those of you who don't know, we're an industry trade association with a mission committed to implementing clean energy projects across the country. We are physically located, at least our legislative and our regulatory teams are physically located in about 18 different states. And what that allows us to do...
Name all of them.
Yes.
Or you're fired.
Alphabetically?
Alphabetically, with state capitals.
Okay. All right. Let's see. No, I'm not doing that right now. I'm just afraid of leaving somebody out.
I'd start making up. I'd be like Uzbekistan.
It's a funny story because my daughter was having problems. She wanted to get some practice on alphabetizing. And so I was like, okay, here's all 50 states, put them in alphabetical order. And she was just like, this is not what I had in mind.
Yeah.
That's what we got. And so in those 18 states, our footprint allows us to be able to establish and maintain relationships and throughout the state capitals with a lot of other associations on the ground and create coalition partners on the ground. And so it helps to have, boots on the ground in those states that we're really active in. From a legislative and regulatory standpoint, I got to put that too. So because there are other programs that we have at United that have a national scale and scope. For example, we also work to resolve our siting issues. So solar siting and storage siting issues, that's taken a national scope. We work on building electrification across the country. We work on transportation electrification. And also we have a wholesale markets team, a very, very adept wholesale markets team that covers the different issues among all the regional transmission organizations and independent service operators. And we also conduct education too with regulatory commissioners all across the country. So at United, we really do take a holistic approach at putting clean electrons onto the electric grid all across the country.
Do y'all do anything with geothermal?
We do have some geothermal members. Yes, we do. And they're not in every state. Geothermal, I think it's more prevalent in some states more than others. So our work is really confined on a state-to-state basis too, for geothermal especially.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I just know a lot of it from Texas and, a lot of the companies are here, friends. But then it seems like most of the projects are out west, Utah, Nevada, and we're trying to figure out a project financing pathway with the Texas Energy Fund. It's always interesting to see how other places are doing it.
I think that gives the trade associations in general have a good model in that way, right? Because the more states that you're represented in or that you represent, the better, more informed you are about, how to apply potentially some solutions from one state over to another state. I'm wary of almost saying that, right? Because every state's got its own characteristic, right? And so there are some states that don't even care about what's going on in other states. And that's understandable, but it's never a good idea to reinvent the wheel, right, Kevin? So yeah, if it's working in another state, then why not just can at least look at it, right?
So that's where you're at. What would you say you do here?
Oh, okay. Yeah. So what do I do? So about 95% of my time is spent in Virginia, working Virginia legislative issues. I am based out of Norfolk, Virginia, not to be confused with Northern Virginia. I've had a lot of people make that mistake before, right? So I'm closer to the North Carolina border than I am to Washington, D.C. I'm about 3.5 hours south of Washington, D.C., right? And Norfolk is based out of the wonderful Hampton Roads area. We moved down here about 3.5 years ago, and I've been working for United for about 2.5 years now. And so in answer to your question, what do I do here, right? So 95%, like I said, of my work is really spent on focusing on Virginia's legislative issues. Hey, what are legislative solutions? What bills can we look at from General Assembly to General Assembly that can move the ball across the finish line, that get us a little closer, right, at least in the state of Virginia, to getting clean electrons onto the grid? And, Virginia, I think, is so unique when you compare it to other states across the country because of the huge demand growth that we're seeing in Virginia.
And what's driving that? Like, I know y'all are like OG of data centers, but how is that playing out now in this new growth cycle? Is it something else? Is it onshoring? What's kind of driving Virginia baseload growth?
Yeah, so there's a lot. And I think Virginia has been on the lead on a lot of different issues. It passed the Virginia Clean Economy Act in 2019, which really does push for more electricity, more clean electricity across the grid. And so you're seeing growth in transportation electrification. You're seeing growth in building electrification. And then, of course, you're seeing growth in large load companies like data centers, right? It's not lost on anybody, right? Virginia does have more data centers. It's called the data center capital of the universe, is what people refer to Virginia as, right? I don't want to confine it just to that, right? It's good to recognize, too, that Virginia falls underneath the PJM's regional transmission organization, operator, however way you want to couch it, too. But we fall into that network of PJM states, too. PJM consists of 13 different states, right? Plus the District of Columbia, not the entirety of those states, but either all or portions of 13 different states, right? Plus the Washington, D.C. area.
So when you cover Virginia, what does that mean? Like, are you out there hobnobbing, playing golf with some lobbyists that talk to people? Or are you running to fundraisers and shaking hands with elected officials? Or are you just writing papers and being like, see how smart I am and please, like, believe in my issue?
Yeah, kissing hands and shaking babies. I don't play golf. I should play golf, but no, I don't play golf. I do spend most of my travel days in Richmond, right? I'll go up there. That's where the General Assembly meets. Mm-hmm. You'll find me up in Richmond during the entire General Assembly session, too, which normally starts somewhere around the beginning to the mid of January. And then depending upon whether it's a 45-day session or a 60-day session, will end either the end of February or middle of March. You can find me in Richmond on most days, especially when it's time to meet with lawmakers. But my time here, sitting at a desk, what do I do? I email, right? My daughter asked me, what do I do? I email. That's what I do. At least that's what she thinks I do. So I do. But most of that time is also looking at and engaging with our own companies, our member companies, and really getting up to speed on the changes that are coming in among all those different companies. It's worth mentioning too, at United, we do have a diverse set of technologies and companies. I love solar. I love battery storage. I love wind. But there are other ways too to make the grid more efficient. And our member companies represent, like I said, we take that holistic approach, right? And our member companies really represent other ways that we can make the grid more efficient. How do we use existing infrastructure and get more of those electrons onto the grid? So going back to your question, a lot of that time is also spent really researching, okay, what's the next thing? What do we need to do that gives us the best chance of success in moving the ball forward, right? And so some of the time is used doing that. A lot of time is also used just engaging with new lawmakers, education for lawmakers, for coalition partners also who may not necessarily be up to speed on some of the issues, some of the changes in the technology.
So I've been interested on how these different states work, right? Like, I've gotten some exposure in Texas, Louisiana, Iowa, Oklahoma, other places. But like, I love it in Louisiana. They're like, oh, we might need to talk to the governor. And I'm like, what do you got to do? I'm like, they're like, oh, we just need to go to his crocodile hunt. And I'm like, didn't know that was a thing. And I've since learned that every state has different things that are particular to them, whether it's a fundraiser, an activity. I mean, when we did our Texas State Day, Energy Day with vets last year, they were hosting some rattlesnakes on the Capitol seal inside the building. And we met Miss Texas. And we met the University of Houston mascots. None of that was planned. That just was a Tuesday for the state capitol in Austin. I mean, like, what's the craziest thing you've seen happen in Richmond, Virginia, when you've been down there?
We do have rattlesnakes, I think, here too, because at least we do in the backwoods of Quantico. I think when I went for Marine Corps training, we start here in Quantico, right? So Virginia is actually kind of my old stopping grounds. I grew up in New York, but we start off officer candidate school here in Quantico, Virginia. And I would say I'm so far gone from there. But what is the strangest thing? Oh gosh, there's got to be a strange thing in Virginia, right? There's got to be a strange thing in Virginia. No,
I mean, there's got to be. You're that close. You're like DC adjacent.
Yeah, well, okay. I mean, if you want to talk about what strange things coming out of DC, I don't know. I don't know how much time you have for that. I got to say, my work doesn't really lend itself, I guess, to seeing rattlesnakes. Electric vehicles, I don't know. That's a crazy thing, right? No, I'm joking about that. But no, we don't do crazy things like that in Virginia. No, yeah, Kevin. You know what? We don't do crazy things like that in Virginia.
Texas is just a crazy place to be.
Your words, not mine, but,
I'll take that. Well, so take me back. You brought up being in the Marines there, Quantico.
Yeah.
What was it like? What made you decide to get into the Marines in the first place? And I don't need to ask this question. I already know the answer. If you could take it back, I'm sure you would.
Oh, that's good.
I assume every Marine would.
Okay. Actually, it is funny because my career kind of started that way. I do remember standing up. I was in an office. It was in an office environment. And it was a really, really great company. I enjoyed working with my boss. I was good leadership, I thought, at the time. But I do remember standing up and looking down. Everybody was hunched over in their cubicles and typing away. And I remember thinking, I was 21 years old, I think, at the time, too. And I remember thinking to myself, wow, I'm going to have to do this someday, but I can't do this for the rest of my life, right? So a buddy of mine, we were swimming in Walden Pond. I was in Massachusetts at the time. We were swimming in Walden Pond. For those of you who don't know, Walden Pond was the pond or the body of water that inspired the writings of Henry David Thoreau. And we would go and swim there a lot. And I was with a buddy of mine who was looking into the Marine Corps and who coincidentally ended up joining the Marine Corps 3 months before I did. And he said, Jim, why don't you consider the Marines? And I said, the Marines? Oh, I don't want to be a Marine. These guys are barbarians. These guys are savage.
Good thought.
Jeez. Yeah, right?
I like where this is going. This makes sense to me.
Well, okay, I'm going to flip this script here a little bit here, Kevin. So I walk into the Marine recruiter's office and I say, hey, I'm thinking about being a Marine. And he says, oh, you're thinking about being a Marine, huh? And he throws the application in my face. He says, hey, fill this out. Give me 3 recommendations. Get ready for an ASVAB examination. Get ready for a physical fitness exam. Get ready for a medical examination. Talk to me in 6 months when you're serious about this thing. And so I walk out of the room, Kevin, and I say, okay, I'm going to be a Marine. And 6 months later, sure enough.
It's like negging a girl at the bar. Like, I'm just going to get some free real estate in your mind.
It works.
Here we are.
Marine Corps does not have numbers. We don't have problems making numbers.
I am jealous of that. The esprit de corps and like, why'd you join the Army? College, seemed like a good job.
The judge made you?
Yeah. There's always some story, right? And then it's like, why'd you join the Marines? I wanted to be a Marine. It's a better story.
Yeah. But I wasn't the guy who grew up. I mean, I ended up going into aviation, right? But I wasn't the guy who grew up with posters of jets and helicopters on my walls. I mean, look at me. My parents were immigrants, Indian immigrants. I was born, if I could tell the story here, my mom came here in 1973 with $6 in her pocket. She didn't own a pair of shoes until she was 16 years old. That was back in India, right? And then this opportunity came over to come to the States on a nursing visa. And so she had $6 in her pocket when she got off the plane, right? And then this was 2 years before she went back to India, got married to my dad, and they got married in January of 1976. But my dad, he couldn't get his visa paperwork in order. So he ended up coming and joining my mom, landing at JFK International Airport on July 4th, 1976, right? Bicentennial of the United States. He walks out of the airport. It's the middle of the night. He sees the fireworks going on. And he says, wow, this is what America is like every night? So, he had no idea.
You guys did this for me?
Yeah, right. Any number of things that was going on in his head. And so fast forward 8 months and 1 day later, my brother and I were born. I have an identical twin brother, right? So, which I feel sorry for him, right? So my parents wasted no time in getting a family in order, right? And so I did not grow up thinking about the Marine Corps. This was not something, but it wasn't something that was forced upon me. I really felt like this was a calling. I'm proud to this day to answer that call. And, if truth be told, I think I was only planning on sticking around for 4 years and then doing something else. But then I was having too much fun, Kevin,
Mm-hmm.
And how long did you stick around?
So I stuck around for the
The
full
whole
20.
20?
20 years, yeah. The whole 20, yeah. Not that I was counting, but I think it was like 20 years, 1 month, 4 days, something like that.
Something.
Yeah.
And then you and I meet not long after you get out and you go through a SkillBridge program. So what was that like using a SkillBridge?
Yeah. By the time you and I met, I think I was already working for SunPower Corporation, which had hired me out of SkillBridge. So I did end up doing my SkillBridge program through SunPower. And I'll never forget this too. My boss at the time, I'm going to name her too, because I'm very, very grateful that she took a chance on me, Suzanne Lita. And she was the manager of regulatory, so the director of the legislative work on government affairs for SunPower at the time. She hired me during the SkillBridge program. And her mindset was, okay, here's a guy who understands the legislative process, because by that point I had done a Congressional Fellowship towards the tail end of my Marine Corps career. So I developed some policy chops, and, once you get that stink on you, the Marine Corps doesn't let it go, right? So for the last 3 years of my Marine Corps career, I was doing advocacy for Marine Corps aviation. So Suzanne says, I don't have time to teach this guy the policy world, but I could teach him solar all day long. And so she takes this chance on me, and I'm very, very grateful that she did. And so I was with SunPower Corporation, and you and I met. It was at an RE Plus forum, and we were on a panel together. I think you were the moderator of the panel, right? And
I was.
You were interviewing me or something like that, busting my chops.
Yeah, that's when I was kind of taking over the RE Plus happy hours from Dan Mish.
Gotcha.
Dan was like, I'm busy. I can't do this. Kevin, why don't you go do this?
Gotcha. Okay. Was that your first foray into the renewable energy world?
No, I'd been running some happy hours for ACP back when it was a WIA 19. So that was like 21, 22 when we did that.
Yeah.
And so that was the first time I did that for RE Plus. We literally just got the phone with them with RE Plus last week. We now have an MOU with them. And so we'll have a big thing there in Vegas this November again.
Yeah.
No, they've been great partners. And that was back when I was still like doing O&M, and this was like really good BD. Because I remember at that panel, I had like the last flight I could get out because I wanted to see my daughter.
Yeah.
Like somebody came up to me because I kept getting stopped to talk to. And she's like, you got your bag? And I'm like, I'm sorry, what? She's like, come on, I'll walk you out. Everyone will see me talking to you and they won't interrupt us. She just walked us out. And then she asked me one question at the end. She's like, but I did have a question. And I'm like, sure, you just got me through like a room of 80 people that I unfortunately could not talk to. And unfortunately, they had disfortune of thinking that because I moderated a panel, I knew anything. And she helped me get out of there. And like, then I was able to haul it and make it to LA or Vegas airport on time.
Okay. Wow. Who was that person?
I don't remember.
Oh, okay. All right.
I don't remember. I want to say it was Wendy Jorgensen from Airstreams because that's something that she would do. And I'm pretty sure she was there, but I could be wrong.
All right.
I'll have to ask Wendy after this, but it sounds like something Wendy would do.
Okay. That's good. Well, Wendy, if it was you, thank you.
Okay. So, you get into the SkillBridge. How long was SkillBridge? Was it a 6 month or was it a 3 month?
Sorry. Yeah. Thanks for bringing back the SkillBridge piece. That was 12 weeks long. The thing with SkillBridge is, I think it was actually initiated during the Bush administration, I thought, and I could be wrong on that too, but the Marine Corps is always kind of slow with these things. We really kind of start to see it during the Obama administration. And it was designed as a way for active duty vets to be able to transition into the corporate sector. And it was 12 weeks and it allowed you to participate in this, either you call it a fellowship, co-op program, but it gave you some practical exposure for 12 weeks during the last 6 months of your service, right? So during that time, you're still getting a DoD paycheck, right? So basically you are free labor for any company that wants to hire you, right? At least for those 12 weeks. And, if it works out well, the company could hire you, you're set. You have pretty much a parachute or a soft landing coming out of the military. And even if it doesn't work, even if your employer doesn't hire you right out, you still have that experience too, that civilian workforce experience too, that you can transition into. But I remember as I was going through the program, it was during COVID and they had disconnected. So they had stopped TAD orders associated with SkillBridge, right? So I couldn't travel. Everything had to be done remote. So I had to find a company that was willing to hire me remotely which actually at the end of the day wasn't such a big deal because I was doing policy work and I wanted to kind of shift those policy skills over from DoD into another industry. And I was specifically looking for renewable energy. I was specifically looking to try and get into the renewable energy industry.
Why?
For a couple of different reasons. One, I thought it had a lot of runway. Now, I didn't think renewable energy was going anywhere anytime soon. I thought it was an industry that was only growing. The second reason is, and I say this, it's going to come across maybe sounding a little cheesy, but I thought it was another way that I could give back. Maybe I didn't realize that at the time, but once I became familiar, or at least more familiar with the industry, I realized that this was a way for me to give back. This was another way for me to kind of
keep serving.
Yeah, to extend the service that I had just finished, right? And not to knock them, I could have stayed. I was retiring out of the Pentagon at the time, right? I could have worked for a defense contractor. I could have done well, I think, doing that as well. I wanted to do something else. I wanted to do something different. And I felt like this was something that I could really feel good about myself doing. Not that I wouldn't feel good about myself doing other things, but this was something I think that hit home for me. And so SkillBridge gave me an opportunity to do that. SkillBridge, SunPower hired me. Yeah.
Do you think a 3-month was long enough? Do you think you would have preferred a 6-month? Like we had set up a 6-month one with ACP and we're just having a lot of trouble getting companies to like onboard people that way. But I've also heard a lot of horror stories of like commands not authorizing a 6-month SkillBridge.
Yeah. I would say, so 6 months, you're right. I think it is going to be tough for commands to let go of individuals for 6 months. I guess my argument to that is if somebody is transitioning out of the military and you don't have a plan for that person in the last 6 months of that person's career, then that's probably some sort of a leadership gap. You probably should have some sort of a plan, right? I think 12 weeks maybe is a little on the short side. I think if we could make it maybe closer.
I just think about like, you've got a summer break. How much do you learn at summer camp?
Yeah. I think it depends on the industry. I think it depends on your expectations. So when I was going through SkillBridge, there were your traditional companies in the area that were looking for us. So your Amazon Web Services, you definitely had your defense contractors. There were no renewable energy companies that were participating in SkillBridge at the time.
Mm-hmm.
I had to find them and I had to get them accepted by the program. And it was really at the 11th hour. I was kind of hunting and pecking. I didn't find it until literally within 24 hours after I had to make a decision about whether or not I was going to. I had to submit the name of my company. I remembered that the program administrator for SkillBridge ended up finding the Solar Ready Vets program through SIA, and they looped me in. It looked like my manager had been looking for vets through this program for a while and trying to leverage that program because she'd been looking for somebody with legislative experience. So I met a couple of buckets there too. But lucky, right? I got lucky, but hey, I'll take luck over skill any day.
Yeah. So go back, when did you get the bug that like, even when you're in the Corps, that you wanted to go on Capitol Hill, do this congressional stuff? What kind of was like, you're already in the military.
Yeah.
And then you're like, now I want more government in my life.
Yeah, I know. Right.
Most of the time, people in the military are like, oh man, I can't wait to get out in the field and get away from the flagpole. And, I want to do this or do that. And you're like, I would like to go move into the flagpole.
Actually, yeah. Actually, I thought that this was a way to totally get off the flagpole. Like I was...
Say more.
Yeah, gosh. I mean, there were guys who were going rogue, like going native once they got on Congressional Hill. Or like, Marine Corps, what? Yeah. You're not wearing the uniform. You're dressing up in a suit every day.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I mean, you were meant to embed yourself into the legislative process, into Capitol Hill. I think people will finally realize that you're military by one, maybe your posture, by your stature. For the first time you make a voice, you say something out loud. I mean, you are that lawmaker's defense fellow. So everybody inside the office knows who you are. But your question is, it's a good question. I was coming upon the end of my aviation career and I still wanted to serve. I still felt like I still had value to add to the Marine Corps. And this had always been something that I grew up definitely respecting the government. Respecting the process in this country. I know for better or for worse, people will criticize government, and I get that. But if you don't like how the government's being run here, just take a look at some of the other guys who are practicing it, right? Like,
yeah.
No,
I know. When people complain about capitalism or democracy, it's like, listen,
yeah,
they suck, but they're the least suckiest.
That's exactly right. And so I always respected the way our form of government. And so this was a way I said, okay, this looks like a good opportunity. I had heard about this program from a friend of mine. And it's okay, let me throw my hat into the ring and see what happens. And I was fortunate, I think. I was lucky. I think I was at a good time in my career to approach something like this. And I spent a year in the office of Senator Perdue. And he was great. I really enjoyed the office. I enjoyed the people inside the office. Really, really bright people. And I have to say, a lot of them were a lot younger than I was, but they're a lot smarter than I was, right? And Senator Perdue was the junior senator from Georgia at the time. And I had good friends who lived in Georgia. Like, I felt the connection to Georgia in some way, shape, or form anyway. And so I was really happy. I was blessed. I was definitely blessed to land in that office. It was a really, really great office. And I learned a lot.
No, that's great, man. Well, so now you're helping us out, building up our Virginia chapter. We've had a couple of calls about this as part of the community leader program. Aside from me just incessantly saying, you're going to do this, I need you to do this, I need to fill out my quota of Marines or I don't meet my DEI targets. Why did you want to do this? You're busy. You're doing a bunch of stuff.
Yeah. Well, I think it was the way that you had couched it also, Kevin. I remember what it was like coming out of the Marine Corps, wondering if I had skills that I could apply to civilian America. I walked out thinking, okay, yeah, I've been in the Marine Corps for 20 years, but I still held on to my civilian roots. I still have a lot of friends who are civilians. Nobody from my family that joined the military, right? I mean, I had an uncle in India who was in the Indian Army, but that's very, different. And I thought that it was going to be a pretty easy transition. No, it wasn't. I think I'm only just coming around. I've been retired for like 5.5 years. I think I'm only just coming around to a day where I didn't think about my service, right? I mean, up until this point, I felt like I'm thinking about my service every day, right? So, and I remember, I do feel like I did set myself up for success because I knew that I was coming upon retirement. And I did start that process early. I started looking and shaping myself to get out of the military like 2 years before I did, right? And networking, right? I wasn't spending my time in the Marine Corps in the office. I was focused, on what I needed to be focused on. But after I got out at the end of the day, I went to networking sessions. I was asking people, hey, what do you think I would be qualified for? I was buttoning up my resume.
And how are you finding those people that you asked that question? I mean, are you just grabbing anyone that you know in your command structure, in your personal network, or that you met through your internship, or, when you're on Capitol Hill, Or, are you thinking, hey, if I want to know X industry, I need to go find X people within it? Like, did you have a strategy on how you kind of came at that and approached it?
Yeah. I didn't have a strategy about the renewable energy industry. No, I was making friends. I don't think I was, I was still married. Yeah, I was married at the time. And I was.
Good catch.
Yeah, I know, right? Yeah.
I just see a shoe fly by.
I know, right. Yeah, exactly. I was having conversations with my wife and with her friends, with my civilian friends. There were folks, too, that I was working with in the Pentagon that I sought advice from. There was actually an Army colonel was the one who said, hey, Jim, you got to take this seriously. If you're transitioning out, you really have to do your prep work ahead of time. Otherwise, you're going to find yourself unemployed, as soon as you walk out of that door, right? And I took that advice very, very seriously. And I would talk to anybody that I could find. Hey, I'm Jim Purekal, Major Jim Purekal, United States Marine Corps. What do you think? I would tell them my story. I would tell them, hey, I'm probably going to be looking for a job here in a couple of years or about a year and a half. Would you have a conversation with me about opportunities that are out there? I was potentially looking at school. I know that it seems like it's a pretty overwhelming experience when you get out. I think a lot of folks try and kick the can down the road because it's outside of our comfort zone in a lot of ways. But I think military personnel are comfortable when they're operating outside their comfort zone, right? But it is uncomfortable having those conversations with people in all respects who have not had that experience that you've had, right?
So what is your advice, having gone through that, for veterans that are getting out now and are looking at this industry?
Yeah. Well, this industry first, I think there are a lot more programs and a lot more avenues and people in the industry now that can act as a resource than there were when I got into it, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think people should seek out people within the career field. I know SEIA does have a really, really good program. The Solar Ready Vest program I think is a really, really good program. And I think they have had...
It got axed in all the Doge funding cuts. So it is no more.
Oh, that's why they haven't been reaching out to me.
Yeah, I know. It's a real heartbreaker. I mean, the SkillBridge program, which is what that Solar Ready Vets program is just phenomenal. I mean, it's second by not a long shot, by a lot to the GI Bill. I mean, the GI Bill is the best social mobility tool America ever invented, but
agreed.
SkillBridge is like the second best thing on helping vets transition effectively. It's crazy that they've been winding it back a little bit.
That's nuts.
I know,
okay.
Right?
All right. Okay. Well, there's Project Vanguard, right? And so I think this is a good opportunity. And I'm grateful to you, Kevin, for setting this up, because I think it does potentially fill in that gap now where Solar Ready Vets, now without Solar Ready Vets, especially too. So, but there are veterans in the field today.
Yeah.
And I think it's important to realize that. And it's important to realize that you do have skills, especially those soft skills that can transition quite well into this world. You got to give yourself some grace. You have to realize that, we are adaptable, we are flexible. You have to realize too that there is going to be a learning curve. There's going to be a lot of learning that does come along with transitioning into this field. I talk about the soft skills because, I think we're used to putting ourselves in uncomfortable situations and, situations where we do have to learn. Quite honestly, I think this is the first job I've had that I've been maintaining for more than 2.5 years, right? Over the last 20 something years, right? God. Because in the military, definitely in the Marine Corps, you're rotating from one job to another. It seems like every year and a half or so. And so I feel now that I've been able to maintain some continuity. And so I think you need to give yourself some time also to learn what you need to learn and realize that there's a lot of opportunity out there. There really is, especially in this industry.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's, I learned a lot about this industry when I was trying to come in through podcasts, stuff like that. I mean, that's really why Project Vanguard is just like a vanity project of things I wish I had when I was trying to come in. Man, I wish there were like a group of vets I could just hang out with and ask them questions and not worry about feeling stupid.
Yeah.
And they would get it when I ask something sideways, and then I use a little bit of dark humor, and maybe I tease my friends a little bit more than I should, and nobody's going to get angry at me.
Right.
And I have to apologize. And then they're all working in the domain or space that I want to. And then I would always listen to these industry podcasts, and I'm like trying to follow along. I'm like, I'm going to have to listen to this again. So hopefully other service members are able to hear your story, others, and be like, I get it a little bit faster because we all served. And so there's a little bit of a shared vernacular, op tempo, kind of like how we present and prepare ourselves. And that just makes this a little bit easier to understand the industry.
Yeah, I agree. As I was talking about the different backgrounds, right? You have Marines who are coming with managerial skills. You got Marines who have policy skills, right? There aren't too many military personnel that I see in the policy area here, at least in the state of Virginia, but they're out there, I think. You have sales skills, right? A lot of military end up going into sales because they carry the disposition. They can maintain a conversation. They can sell, right? Of course, you have development within the developer community. You have large scale projects. There's no shortage of opportunities, I think, for military personnel to get out there and actually get their hands dirty. Military personnel and I, and are afraid of getting our hands dirty. We're getting out there and putting on some boots and getting out there and walking, hitting the pounding the pavement. So, we do windows.
That's right. Well, hey, last question I'll ask you. Our favorite tagline is energy security is national security. And I just think that our members are the best to really sell that into the American mindset of why energy matters. What does energy security mean for you?
And this goes back to, one of the reasons I think what really motivated me, and you had asked me this question before, but one of my last assignments when I was still in aviation, this is before I had done my Congressional Fellowship, I was in Pakistan. This was late 2010. And I remember, I was the only Indian officer in Pakistan at the time. I remember thinking, and we were there providing support for a humanitarian assistance mission. There were floods that had ravaged southern Pakistan, and we had set up an airfield. I was working with a lot of Army folks there that were based out of ODRP, the Office of Defense. Oh, ODRP, what does ODRP stand for? Anyway, whatever. It's an acronym out there. So, well, there we go. That sounds great. But they were attached to the Pakistani embassy, and they were specifically tasked with providing support to people, to the civilians of Pakistan who had been ravaged by these floods. Because the Pakistani military was assisting us with border operations between Pakistan and Afghanistan, they did not have the resources to be able to devote to this particular cause, right? So I was part of one unit that stepped in. And I remember the temperature getting up there in Pakistan. It was high as 147 degrees. I think it was actually closer, 120 degrees Fahrenheit. It was one of the hottest summers on record, but that's just the temperature outside, right? When you look at the heat that's coming off of the asphalt and just the ground heat, now you're experiencing temperatures in excess of 140 degrees Fahrenheit, right? And it was during Ramadan, and the Pakistani soldiers the limited number of Pakistani soldiers that were assisting us were out of commission in the daytime, right? Because they weren't eating or drinking in the daytime at all, right? And everybody was scrounging just to find some sort of shade. And I remember thinking to myself, okay, this is bananas. Yeah, these summers are just getting hotter and hotter. And I don't want this for my country. This is not where I want the United States to be headed. And there is a solution out there. And whether you believe in climate change or not, I think at the end of the day, the insurance companies will dictate whether or not people believe in climate change or not, right? But I do believe that developing clean energy is a way for us to not turn into what southern Pakistan was looking like at that time, for one. And two, it allows us a greater sense of energy independence. Can you imagine what we would be like today if we were relying on 100% fossil fuel generation, electricity generation and heating also from fossil fuels? Like, I do think that advanced energy solutions provide us that alternative. And I'll even flip it around a little bit more, because now these solutions are less expensive than they've ever been and less expensive than the fossil fuel alternatives. So I count now as fossil fuels as the alternative of electricity generation now, because there's such a growth now to this industry. Imagine, I think all it takes is just a little bit of imagination.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you just said Pakistan.
Yeah.
Right? Like, Pakistan's built up like a 50% solar base in like a couple of years just because we can't rely on the grid.
That's right.
Right? We do not have the kind of pipeline infrastructure that America is blessed with. We don't have like domestic supplies, so we're a net importer. That is energy insecurity at its highest, right?
That's right.
And so individuals are just like, well, screw this. I'm used to like having massive blackouts. I would prefer solar without a battery to this other stuff. I know when the sun's coming up. I don't know when like the power's ever going to come back on from the central planning that is not being centrally planned well.
Yeah.
And, you've seen that, or you've seen places like Syria where every rooftop in Aleppo is now like covered in solar. The craziest thing, it's like, this is when people take power into their own hands to maintain their own way of life. They end up doing one thing.
That's right. Yeah.
And that's not a 100% solution. I get that. The sun doesn't always shine. But man, we've solved half the problem. We just got to get to the other side of it. And batteries are doing a really great job. I mean, that's what I have in my house.
That's right. Can you imagine? I mean, there are companies that are out there that are looking at long duration storage, I think is so key to this whole solution. And the technology that we're seeing is only becoming more and more prevalent, more impactful, and more affordable. So I think at the end of the day, how do you not look at those type of resources and see these can be national assets?
Yeah, absolutely. Jim, I know you got to run, man, but I really appreciate you making the time today to come and share your story, kind of give people advice. And I know you're not active on the Slack channel or you'd be posting these jobs, but I know that y'all are hiring. So let people know how they can get in touch with you. For our other community leaders that are active on Slack, you can just join Project Vanguard at projectvanguard.com and access the Slack channel, see some jobs, meet some folks. But how can folks get a hold of you, Jim?
Yeah. So that's what that Slack channel's for, huh, Kevin?
That's what the Slack channel's for. All the stuff we've been talking about today. That's what it's for.
No, you can feel free to contact me also via email at jpurekal@advancedenergyunited.org. That's a handful there, but that's jpurekal@advancedenergyunited.org. Or can I give out my phone number? Am I allowed to give out my phone number?
I wouldn't do that if I were you.
Nah, okay,
But they can find you on LinkedIn too.
They can find me on LinkedIn as well. Yeah. So Jim Purekal. Yeah, you can find me on LinkedIn if you just do a search. But yeah, I'll be putting some posts there on that Slack channel too, Kevin.
Trying to break OPSEC. I mean, like, come on, man.
I know, right? I know. I just want to give out my phone number for some reason. I don't know why.
Get those digits. All right, Jim. I'm going to let you go, brother, but I'll be talking to you soon. Probably more than you really want to, but
guaranteed.
Buckle up.
All right. Thanks, Kevin. Appreciate it.
All right. Thanks, brother. Thanks for tuning into the Project Vanguard podcast. If this episode sparked something for you, share it with someone who's ready to think differently, whether it's about an all-the-above energy approach, how energy security is national security, or the veteran workforce in our industry. If you believe what we're building, a quick review goes a long way. You can do that wherever you get your podcasts. Until next time, keep up the fire.